I'm in the outer suburbs of Perth in this industrial park, which is a pretty unassuming setting for one of the most high-tech setups for a brewery we have ever visited. Let's go check it out. We're continuing our trip down the coast to WA, but there's so much more to see in Perth, and today it's all about beer. Limestone Coast Brewing is located in Perth's northern suburbs, and it's pioneering a way of delivering the freshest and most consistent beer possible. First up, I'm meeting one of the founders, Brad, to find out how it all got started. Brad, thank you so much for having me here at Limestone Coast Brewing.
Yeah, thanks, Maddie.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
How long have you been working here? I mean, you're the founder and director, so I imagine for a long time?
Yeah, so I was involved in starting this business. It started in a garage in Hillary's just up the road. This is our second home. And it's where we've been commercially brewing for about 4 years, but it's 5.5 years since we actually started.
And so where are we actually located?
So we're in Malaga in the northern suburbs of Perth. But interestingly, the way our business model has been developed, we actually have 4 venues, 2 in the city. This plant that we've got here can be the heart of 20 different venues. Yeah. And that's our ambition. I suppose our bigger plans after that is we're looking to build and replicate this in Melbourne, in Sydney, in Brisbane, in Adelaide.
But your philosophy here, what's your main objectives?
So when we started the business, the 2 other founders, Jeff Monday and Sven Groen, they're both engineers. In their garage at home, a highly automated craft brewery, we were sort of throwing around this idea of how do we take this, this high level of automation. We wanted to be able to take that out into people to experience what we get to when we work in the industry. We get to drink straight from the tanks. The best beer is when it's really, really fresh. That's when you get those great hop aromas. That's the pinnacle, I suppose, of the experience. We wanted to be able to bring that to other people in a much bigger way. So what we've done that's really unique is we've split the brewing process. In fact, we've patented this technology. There's a lot of sort of trade secrets in what we do as well. We've split the hot and the cold parts of the brewing process. And so what you'll see here in our sort of central hub or our brew house here is we do the hot part of the process, where everything prior to fermentation, all of the elements that can be taken away from human control have. So, we don't have our brewers running around madly, pulling on valves, and even our cleaning is really automated as well. The brewers love that.
Yeah. In
splitting the process, we actually put our fermenters and our bright beer tanks into our venues. So some of those venues are our venues and some of those venues are our customers' venues. We've found that when we put the tanks into those venues, our very first venue, as soon as we did that, we times his beer consumption by 4. But by putting the tanks into the venue and giving people the freshest, possibly the highest quality beer that they can, for the customer, it's the experience that they want.
Yeah, so it's really started from this urge to share this amazing experience, these great tastes, and share it with people that might never have access to that freshness. So you mentioned there's a pilot kit where it all got started. I would love to see that.
So we actually still use that pilot plant today, and we use it a lot with our research and development. Come along, let me show you.
Oh, cool. The pilot kit is where this all started. Now, pay attention, home brewers.
So Maddie, this is our pilot plant. So when I first met Jeff and Sven, this was in their garage and surrounded by maybe 20 fridges full of different craft beers. I thought, I want one of these at home. Even though this was made at home, by 2 engineers in their spare time, this is actually a highly automated microbrewery in its own right. It does 50-litre batches. It's the same labour, interestingly, to do a 50-litre batch here as there is to do a 1,200-litre batch on our main rig. Brewing beer, it's both an art and a science. The art is flavour creation, and that's a lot of fun. But the science is exactly that. It's science, and it's something that can be perfectly repeated time after time. Our big, I suppose, industrial breweries like a Heineken, they've refined that science to deliver that flavour perfectly every time. Now, we've done the same thing, but at a craft brewery level.
That's pretty amazing because, as you said, it could have the error of humans at times, where you've kind of taken it out and you've got that consistency that you can rely on, but also the creativity and flexibility to play with new flavors still. It's time to meet George, the head brewer, who's going to take us through some of the automation and how they use it.
With our technology, each fermenter has its own little electronic control box. Inside here, there'll be power supplies, PLCs, little air solenoids, which has its own program. So this will control how this ferments, burps, open little valves up, etc., etc. That's the cutting edge. I mean, we have this on site at customer sites. It reduces our footprint on their property. This will send all the information out to the HMI on the SES, and on the HMI is where we see all the graphs, the carbon dioxide capture, the fermentation progress, the temperature, the pressure inside the tank as well.
Really monitor it close. So this seems like a lot of tech going on. So who was behind it all and designed it?
It is. Well, I think Brad may have mentioned before, this all stemmed from Jeff being our mentor brewer, and he was brewing beer for a long time. He brewed some great beer on the small R&D rig that you saw over there before it was automated. My brother, who Sven and Jeff used to work before, Sven's an electrical engineer and programmer. He had, as what Jeff would say, the brain fart. Why don't we automate this and make it easier? You know, that way it will not only eliminate human error, but also allow you to achieve consistency time and time and time again. So Sven put his thinking cap on, figured out a way to have individual control of fermenters, the site control station, how it did all the programming for all this as well, how it all talked and interacted. It worked really well as a team.
Yeah, and that enabled you guys to actually scale up to this level that you're operating at now.
Absolutely, yes.
Well, I think I better go meet Sven then.
Sure.
Thanks for chatting to me.
Good on you, mate.
All right then, time to meet Sven, the brains behind the high-tech brewery. He's going to walk me through the automation process. Sven, thank you so much for meeting with me. I've heard a lot about you and that you might be responsible for this high-tech brewing system. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So when we started the business, Jeff and myself, we realised we had to do things a little bit differently. And both of us coming from an oil and gas background with a lot of history in process automation, we brought those same skills into our brewery so that we could manufacture a very, very wide range of beers very consistently and very repeatably for our customers. So rather than having the brewers run around operating manual valves and a couple of buttons here and there, we can, with 3 guys, brew pretty much continuously, but 1 guy can do 3 batches in a 10-hour day, whereas most craft breweries would probably have to have 2 or 3 guys just to do the 1 batch. So that's the sort of power of having this kind of equipment.
I'm sure there's a lot still of the human element in there, and you've got all of your recipes that you're designing.
All of the creativity, all of the way the ingredients are put together and how they're treated in the equipment is completely under the control of the brewers. What this does is allow them to focus on that creativity and not have to focus on chasing pumps and valves during the day.
Gosh, every brewer that must be their dream. Living the dream. And with that, we'll see you after the break. I'm at Limestone Coast Brewing, and I've been learning about some of the highly automated equipment used to brew beer. I'm chatting to Brad again to find out more about the most important and underrated ingredient of all, water.
So Maddie, what we've got here is actually the start of the brewing process for us. It's not the mash tun, it's not crushing the grain, it's actually the water. If you think about the history of beer, 400 years ago in that little abbey, those monks were playing with their local ingredients, their local water, their local grains, their local hops. And the beer that they then created and the recipes that they created all started with that local water. The town of Pilsen is where the Pilsner came from. Beer that's from Stoke-on-Trent, the dark lagers from there, or Guinness coming, the peaty waters, the trace elements, the minerals. I suppose to a layman, water's water, but when you really dig into the chemistry and how that interacts with the grains, the hops, through that process, having the right water chemistry to start with. But it's not pure water. We have a full reverse osmosis plant. We could make beer with absolutely pure water. We have. It was okay. But when you make the water from the region where that beer style comes from, it's a totally different experience. And so we've used that prototype rig that you've seen and run experiments. We've tried different water chemistry and blind taste testing. Without doubt, without fail, everybody within our brewing team on a blind taste test picks the one with the right water chemistry.
Really? How interesting. So to recreate the right beer style, you need to recreate the right water. So let's take a little peek in here then.
Sure, so in this cabinet, we've got a bunch of equipment here that is controlling all of our pumps. So rather than have the pump just going flat out or off, we speed control all of our pumps. So we can control the rate of transfer of water to the kettle, of mashing water into the mash tun, etc. So all of that's controlled by the computer. So,
look at all those cables.
Yeah, so this is basically the computer that operates it. That's the PLC, or Programmable Logic Controller. This is all of the terminations where we bring in all of the valves, so to measure pressure, temperature, flow, pump speeds, etc. And then we translate those signals to these instruments here, which turn air on and off to our valves. So they're all pneumatic. So these blue hoses carry air out to the valves, and it's all controlled by the computer.
Oh my God, I love it. A little bit above my head in here. It looks very complicated, but I like the end product.
Yeah.
And that's the most important thing.
Well, maybe that's something we need to go and taste now.
I think so. I feel like a beer is well deserved after trying to make sense of all of that. I've seen the process. I'd love to experience the end product.
Yeah, you've come to the business end here. So normally what I do when people come along to taste, I take them on the journey, the flavour journey. So we'll start you off just with our standard Oktoberfest lager, just a clean, drinking, easy, neutral lager, not too hoppy, not too malty, very slammable.
Okay.
So yeah, you'll see the nose on this is pretty neutral, easy drinking, crisp, clean, just a good palate cleanser.
Yeah.
So cheers.
Cheers. Oh, that's refreshing. Well, the aftertaste is really clean and the mouthfeel is really crisp. That's great. That hit the spot, but there's still more to see in the brewery. Next, I'm talking to Brad about the wort and how it fits into their technological process. For those unfamiliar with wort, it's actually the first step in the brewing process, similar to boiling up porridge. This process extracts all the sugars from the barley.
So Maddie, I can't open this one up to show you because we're in the middle of a boil, but have a look in there.
Whoa, yep, it is definitely boiling away.
But we're boiling it down and thickening up the wort. This is the last stage of the process that happens here. We transfer here into our hot liquor tanks and let it cool down. And then we take it from here. This is where we transfer the wort, or the unfermented beer. And that's where we take it out to our venues, where we ferment in the venue. We dry hop, we gas, we filter in the venue. So, that ambition I said before of having 20 venues, each one of them will actually be producing the beer on site.
Yeah.
So we do part of the process here and the other part there.
Once the wort has finished cooking, it gets pumped into the fermenters. Let's take a look at what happens after that.
What I wanted to show you here is an example of the fermenters that we have on site and also the bright beer tanks. We take the wort that comes out of our hot plant, and in our venues we have permanently installed fermenters where we will pump the wort at the yeast and then in real time monitor exactly what's going on from the temperature, specific gravity and even carbon dioxide production.
Wow.
So that we can actually manage and monitor. Well, I say we, it's the software. If we set a target for this beer to be 4.2% alcohol, it will shut off and crash chill at exactly 4.2% alcohol. So we know how much is in each bright tank at all times, and our entire team can actually monitor and manage every part of our brewing process remotely from a phone or an iPad.
Wow, so you're telling me if this is somewhere miles and miles and miles away, you can still have that control over what's going on in there and know exactly how it's all going?
So we can actually show you right now the levels of beer in the tanks in Southern Cross, which is over 400 kilometres away.
Wow, that's amazing. While I'm still out here in the heart of the brew floor, I better grab a taste of the freshest beer possible. Brewer Jordan is leading the way. So Jordan, what have we got here?
So this is a German Schwarzbier, which in a lot of ways is kind of similar to a stout, but instead of being with an ale yeast, this is with a lager yeast. So other than being a style of beer, lager is actually a different species of yeast, ale being one and lager being another. Being with a lager yeast is very clean and crisp, so it's not much yeast esters or aromas, so it helps to accentuate the malt flavours, which you have a lot of in a dark beer, like a lot of chocolate and caramel that you get from the malt.
Perfect pairing. And so you've just pulled it. So what stage is this compared to what you get at a bar in the final product?
So this is pretty close. The beer is finished fermenting, so what you taste right now is what you're going to get in the keg essentially, or in the can. The step it's at the moment is it's been crash chilled down to 1 degree. So it causes all of the yeast to flocculate or settle out of the beer. And next we're going to pass it through filtration, and then we'll be carbonating it. Lagers have to ferment at cold temperatures and they can take a really long time, but we've been able to start it at a high temperature to get through the growth phase of the yeast. Then as soon as the software realizes that there's a fermentation going on, then it's able to chill it down to cold temperatures, which has shaved a lot of time off of our process without like adding any like bad flavors or off flavors.
Nice. So all this has to do now is go through filtration, and then it's off to its new home wherever it gets sent to.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Wow. All right, well,
Cool.
Smells great. Well, I think that is ready, so I might go taste some of its friends. Well, that was possibly the freshest beer I've ever had.
I guess the next one along the flavour wheel is going to be a little bit different, and I'm going to take us to our session ale, which is our mid-strength. So to make a low alcohol beer, there are 2 ways you can do it. You can use a smaller amount of grain and let the yeast eat it all. That produces just a smaller amount of alcohol. But because the grains are what provides all the body and the creaminess on the tongue and the taste, they normally taste pretty watery. So what we've done for ours is we brewed a full grain bill, so used a proper amount of grain to make the beer, but we stopped the yeast from converting all of that into alcohol. And so what you end up with is quite a malt forward sort of sweetness to the beer, and then we need to balance that with some hops. Again, one of the problems with low alcohol beers is alcohol is the solvent that extracts all the oils and flavors from the hops. So not a lot of alcohol in the beer to start with, you're not going to get a lot of hop flavor in there. So one of the techniques we've developed is we will take our hops separately and soak them in some very high strength ethanol that we make here. Let that extract all those hop oils and flavors out of those hops. We squeeze that out and we put that back into the beer. So we can have a full malt forward flavored beer that still has some hop aroma and bitterness to it to balance that out. So you can see the color on that. That is a nice malt forward ale.
Oh, that is good. And I would not have guessed that that was half strength, mid strength.
Yeah, that's the effect we're going for.
Yeah.
It's one of our most popular selling ones.
Well, that's delicious.
Glad you enjoy it.
Yeah. Next up, the New England IPA.
So back in the 17th century, the English East India Trading Company was going backwards and forwards between England and India for the spice trade. One of the ways they paid their employees in India was in beer. But what they found was that they would make the beer in England, like they always did, put it in barrels, stick it unrefrigerated on a boat for 4 months. And when it got there, it didn't taste like ale anymore. It tasted pretty bad. So what they discovered was that hops are a natural preservative, and the more alcohol in the beer, the less likely it is to go bad. So they started making their normal pale ale, but much stronger, so higher alcohol, and put in a whole heap of hops in there. And by the time it got to the end of the voyage, it tasted like the pale ale they were used to, because all those hops had degraded over time, and it came back to the sort of mild pale ale that the soldiers were used to. New England IPA is the same sort of technique of an India pale ale, but using New World hops. So this is going to get you some really lush, juicy, citrusy, orangey flavors, so very low bitterness beer, but we're also getting up into the 6.2%. This is my go-to beer. I just think it's fantastic. beer to have, simply because it doesn't have that overwhelming hop bitterness and that sort of flowers lingering on the back of your palate. Very smooth, easy drinking, but you need to be careful because it is quite a strong beer.
This is your favourite beer. Do you have a favourite dish that you pair it with?
I'm a bit of a barbecue guy, like low and slow, so I cook American style brisket, and this goes fantastic with a spicy brisket.
Right.
So you're getting that sort of lush, orangey, almost mandarin peel flavours off the back of it. Yeah,
definitely. But yeah, the hops is in there, but the after feel is quite round.
Yeah, it's nice and smooth.
More beer after the break. See you soon.
While filming Celador WA, our crew chose to stay at Ibis Styles East Perth. Conveniently located in the heart of Perth, Ibis Styles East Perth places you near the Swan River and within walking distance of the famous Optus Stadium, Wacker and Perth Casino. Ibis Styles East Perth provides a relaxing space to retire at the end of the day. Wake up feeling relaxed and refreshed before heading down to Eastside Social Restaurant and Bar for a delicious hearty buffet breakfast. You'll be well looked after at Ibis Styles East Perth. For inquiries or bookings, call 08 7099 3400.
I'm at Limestone Coast Brewing, where the feats of engineering are surpassed only by the taste of the beer. The science and the engineering is a massive part of it, but it goes back to your team as brewers, being humans, having that knowledge, that taste experience. And I bet the ingredients choices you choose too.
There's 4 main ingredients. Yeast.
Yeah.
There are hundreds of different types of hops, which all have citrusy, pine, woody, strawberries, mangoes, kumquats, lemons, oranges.
Wow. Yeah.
So that comes down to what type of beer you're trying to create and what flavours you're trying to introduce.
Yeah.
You want to be able to taste the grain characteristics. You want to be able to enjoy the hops and hop aroma if there are hops in there. You also want to be able to enjoy and pick up on the yeast characteristics, the actual water itself, the grains in the mashing process, for example, yeast esters in the fermentation.
Well, thank you so much, George, for talking me through all of this. It's made me a little bit thirsty. Luckily, Sven has a few more lined up for me back at the bar.
So this is an experimental XPA.
All right.
This you'll find has a much sweeter finish on the palate. It's quite a sweet beer, and we find it tends to be a bit divisive. People either love it or they go, no, not for me.
What do you have to do to the recipe to make it an XPA rather than just a pale ale?
There's a conversation. Some people say XPA means extra pale ale, as in it's extra pale.
Okay.
Other people's interpretation of it is it's a pale ale with extra stuff in it.
Okay.
This particular one was supposed to be done along the lines of being an extra pale ale, so not too hoppy, not too bitter, but when it comes across your palate, you're going to get a good bit of, it's almost like a honeyed sugar hit over the back palate.
All right. Oof, yeah, that sweetness comes out. A bit of grapefruit too in there.
Yeah.
Definitely, I don't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't quite expecting that.
Yeah,
I like it.
It's definitely something different, absolutely. So the next sort of place on the flavour wheel, we're going to head up to our pale ale. This I'm particularly proud of. The boys have done an outstanding job on this one. This is a really floral, zesty, crisp, just easy drinking pale ale. Not too strong, 5.3%. But if you smell this now, you'll get a bit of hop aroma on there, and it's going to be like really crisp and zesty. And you'll get that hop bitterness linger on your back palate. You know you've drunk something.
Yeah, and also a bit of citrus through there too. Yeah, it's good. It's refreshing.
Just great on a hot day.
Well, Sven, you've taken me through an amazing flavour journey today.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Next time on Last Drinks, it's back to the Swan Valley for all things gin. See you then.